Hello, everyone. I'm Brooke Warner. I'm here with Linda Joy Myers. Hi, Linda Joy.
Hi, Brooke. Fun to be here with you today.
Always. And we teach memoir together. And so we're very much looking forward to this upcoming class that we're teaching on the author, Annie Ernaux. And Linda Joy, I think it's really important to say, why did we choose to teach this course in which we're going to be covering 4 of Annie's books?
Yeah, right. Well, I remember when she was announced to have won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and we're like, what? A memoirist, a woman memoirist won the Nobel Prize for Literature. So we started Googling and searching and getting all the information we could. It's such a big deal for a memoirist, which is our genre that we've been teaching now for 11 years, really, to win a prize like that and have a woman's life be validated in that way, because so often that is absolutely not the case. And then we got really excited and came up with this great idea.
Right, exactly. To teach 4 of her books, which we'll get into in a minute. But I definitely want to piggyback on that and just note the importance of, yes, a female memoirist being honored with such a high prize. But I read in the New Yorker and just wanted to quote this: her ascension marks a recognition that memoir, in all its many faces and poses, direct, self-critical, rueful and comic, engagé and not, is perhaps the leading genre of our time, as much as the novel was for the first half of the 20th century. And what a powerful statement, because I was thinking when we first started teaching memoir together about 12 years ago, when we really started to think about it, and you had deemed it the year of the memoir, and memoir was popular, yes, but it was also very disdained, as it sometimes still can be, and fraught with all kinds of emotion and cultural critique. So for the New Yorker to say, that it's really the leading genre of our times, and I think that's really been evidenced by how many people are coming to the genre, both in terms of reading and writing. And that's what I think is so important about this, that it's this recognition of the ascension of our genre.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I wrote my memoir years and years ago when it was sort of like, well, dare I do this? And who cares about me? I'm just a girl or a woman in the book, and I think so many, and we know this in our classes, so many women memoirists have that doubt and that voice inside of them, that keeps them from writing or keeps them from getting started or stops them in the middle.
All those things. Yes. So we chose a couple of things that we want to talk about just in terms of what excites us about Annie Ernaux and this prize and her books. And so we're going to discuss that and then let you all know a little bit about our class before closing. But this idea, Linda Joy, about the stories we're not supposed to talk about, which we're just kind of alluding to, and we read so many articles just to prepare for this little talk today, and one of them was talking about Annie's work destigmatizing these very personal experiences. And I wanted to ask you about that. What do you think about destigmatization, and how is memoir in and of itself so important to the work of destigmatization?
Well, part of memoir means if you're writing a memoir, and the way we teach it too is, looking at what are you revealing. I mean, first you're going to reveal things to yourself when you're writing. You're exploring the things that challenged you, that were difficult for you, the conflicts that you had, and these include things like shame. The issue of shame, and the issue of needing to keep things hidden, and the issue of how much truth dare I, or should I, or dare I really put on the page. And I don't know any memoir writer who doesn't struggle with, what will people think, or what will the family think, or, all of those things. But the way Annie Ernaux talks about it in the interviews we've seen and the writing she's done is that she calls herself an ethnologist of her life. And an ethnologist is a person that is exploring not only herself, but her culture and her context, where she comes from. And I think something to remember as we continue talking about her And what she does that's so amazing is that she majored in philosophy in France, which is something. I mean, it's this whole thing where she has been a deep thinker always.
Right. And a little outside of her station in a sense, because she came from working class roots and her family, I think, farmed the land. Really, they weren't so much literary people. And then she
Not at all.
transcended that and went into writing and has always been obsessed with writing, which I think many people who write memoir can absolutely relate to. And yeah, I thought that was an interesting thing too, this idea of being an ethnologist and what does that even mean to her, which if you look her up, she speaks about sometimes. And this book, The Years, which is one of the ones that we're going to be teaching, is really a cultural history. I mean, she's talking about the cultural history of France. That's so fascinating. There's all these different books that we're going to be teaching. We're going to be teaching this one, Just Happening, which is about her abortion experience. That one, A Girl's Story, which is really about her mother's life.
And getting lost.
And finally getting lost. Yeah. And let's talk about her voice, because that was another thing. I was captured by this, one of the articles that we read that simply started, Ernaux is a voice. A voice indeed. I mean, that's really what is so captured in these books, this way that she writes, this distancing that she has, and this dispassion in a way, because she embodies, but she's not there to influence your emotions so much as to show what is there, and then you take it in, and it's startling at times. You know, she has this incredible power of voice. You have a quote from Macron.
Yes, I want to quote what Emmanuel Macron, the French president, said. He said, her voice is that of the freedom of women and of the forgotten.
Right.
So we have two big topics right there. Freedom of women, boom, feminist, you know, the right of women to tell their story. I mean, I've been recently reading some books about that go into the history of literature and poetry and all this in the 20th and the 19th and 20th century. There wasn't a woman mentioned in there. And of course, I'm reading Ernaux, and we're talking and getting ready for this talk. And I'm like, this is the reality. You know, we may forget the actual provable reality is that, you know, there's no mention of women or women's work most of the time on these lists or even in these discussions in literature about women. And I'm like, and then I was reading somebody else's memoir, a man in the early 20th century. And so I'm trying to learn some history. Everything was about how men lived and how men went to school and how men got their work published and how men knew all these publishers and they knew each other from school. And I'm like, what were the women doing?
Yeah, right. The women were supporting the men or trying to get their work published, and it's not the same experience. But while you were talking, I was like, oh, isn't that fascinating? Because we're talking about this idea that she's writing about these stigmatized personal experiences, but in some ways they're stigmatized because they're female experiences. You know, she's writing about orgasm, she's writing about abortion, she's writing about all of these things. And I'm like, wait, why are they stigmatized? Oh, right, because they are women's lived experiences. And so she's bringing them into the open, and she's certainly destigmatizing them in the process, as all of us who are working on memoir projects are attempting to do. But I love what you're talking about, because you're also saying, look, we just need more female voices in the stream so that we can say it's like, it's bigger, there's more, we're here.
Well, the odd thing for me that I was experiencing as I had this aha, you know, was how all these years of my life, and I'm getting older and all that, I didn't notice the absence of women as much as I do now. I mean, of course, the last 10 years or whatever, you know, especially when we're doing our teaching, it was just the way the world was. And so I think what we're talking about is breaking through. This is the way the world is for women, and oh yeah, and what's new, and yet it really made me angry. And I'm reading Ernaux at the same time and talking to you, going, wait a second, this is like a cloud that we've grown up in, like the smog or something, and we didn't even know quite how much it was smothering us.
Totally. I love that characterization and how validating it is for other memoir writers. I mean, it's validating for all memoir writers, and she's elevating the genre, but I think it's particularly, of course, validating for female memoirists because of the nature of what she's writing about and what she's being celebrated for. So we're going to get into all kinds of stuff about her writing. Obviously, this whole class is about how reading Ernaux and others like her, someone who is elevated to this status, can help you in your own memoir and what you're thinking about in your own writing. As yes, the validation part comes almost as a byproduct, because you're going to be validated and inspired when you read this kind of work. Before we end though, Linda Joy, just because we talked about this a little bit before we came on, this idea of writing about writing and how Ernaux breaks rules. And I would love to address that simply because anyone who's read her work, or even if you're going to read her books in preparation for our class, she is breaking a ton of rules. I mean, she pops out of the narrative, she writes about writing, she makes all kinds of lists, she has very non-conventional form, and people have talked about her as genre breaking. I don't think she's genre breaking in the sense that I think her work is very much in the channel of memoir, but she is form breaking, absolutely. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and how do you think we'll tackle that in class, given that we can have sort of a more conventional teaching style in our own classes often?
We have, but who knows? We might break a few rules too as we continue. Well, I noticed the form. Of course, other writers that we've taught have broken form too. Like we're talking about Gina Frangello, and we taught her, and the feminist series that we taught. And we were looking at, how are these books breaking form, and who said how form should be? I mean, where are we getting that? I mean, why do we even think that? What were we reading that said it should be this way, a certain way, let's say? Well, which is always a good thing for us to ask ourselves, because sometimes it's just really something works really well or reads better, or we don't lose the reader. There's reasons to have a certain form. But, when she does the list, I mean, I noticed how easy it was to read 20 things in a row that was describing a certain year of her life. I mean, if she wrote it in narrative, I probably wouldn't read it.
Right. It's
It would be
interesting.
too long. And then the whole thing about writing, I mean, what she does is she takes the story, the scene, let's say she's writing about, and then she backs out of it and then reflects upon it as the person putting together what she's going to keep writing about.
Right.
So it's like a stop camera, the camera stops, we go outside. So it's this sort of meta comment on the thing that she's doing. And it could break, we could argue, well, does it break the story? Well, actually, no, to me, it's more interesting because now I'm watching her mind work, and I'm very curious about how her mind works. Oh, and then I think about how my mind works. Or someone else, so it leads to this branching out, I think, of ideas. I thought it was really, really fun to read.
And I'd love to share an example just so people can hear what we're talking about, because we're going to be covering this in the class quite extensively, and we're celebrating it on the one hand. And I also want to say that it works because it's in the hands of a skilled writer, and you can learn how to do this stuff. But as you mentioned, she's a major in philosophy, and it shows. It's not just this dilly-dallying around like, oh, this is my writing process, blah, blah, blah. It's much deeper than that. And it's, in my opinion, almost an exploration of the writing process and how we even think about memoir, which is also why her books in this class should be so intriguing to memoir writers. So just a short paragraph, because this is the kind of thing that she does just in the middle of a book. She's writing about an experience, and then she says, that being the case, am I to dissolve to the girl of 58 and the woman of 2014 into a single I? or proceed in a way that is, if not the most precise, certainly the most adventurous, which is to say, to dissociate the former from the latter through the use of she and I, in order to go as far as possible in my presentation of the facts and deeds, and go about it in the cruelest possible way, in the manner of people we hear talking about us through a door, referring to us as she or he, which makes us feel we are dying on the spot.
Oh my God.
I just love it. And she has these moments, I mean, they give you the chills. And these books are just worthwhile reads no matter what. So as we conclude, Linda Joy, I mean, we can hold up the various books that we're going to be talking about in this class. All of them, by the way, quite slim. You know, all of them could be read in a single sitting. This class is going to be happening in May. It's 4 consecutive weeks in May. And so we invite you to join us. We would love to have you, and you invite yourself to read these. You know, the class is $149 and plus the cost of the books, which of course supports a brilliant writer that we're admiring and thankful that she's gotten the Nobel as it elevates the genre. And Linda Joy, I'm always looking forward to these kinds of classes with you. We have so much fun. So May 2nd through 23rd, 4 consecutive Tuesdays, 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be celebrating Annie Ernaux and teaching and reading and talking. It's going to be great.
And the freedom to write your life.
Yes, the freedom to write your life. I love that ending. And the URL where everybody can find this class is magicofmemoir.com. We hope to see you there.
Yes.